So, for a bit of context, this actually happened to my friend, which we'll call him by the name Ivan. This was around sometime in 2016 when Ivan was home alone one night. Now, to give a brief context, both of his parents did work the night shifts, so most of the time he would be home alone. But a few times there had been a time where one of his parents would be home, but most of the time he would be by himself. So one night when he was just getting home from school, he had a text from his dad saying that he was going to be pretty much working all night and his mom wouldn't be back till when he went to bed. So, of course, knowing that he had school the next day, Ivan decided to get started on his homework as he usually does since his parents had told him to make sure that he was on top of his homework. They were pretty strict on that, but he still lived with it. Now it had been a little bit, and of course, Ivan was doing his work when all of a sudden he looked to see that there was some sort of flashlight outside. At first, he wasn't so sure as to what it was, so he looked over to see if there was someone outside, but there was no one out there. He then decided to go down and get a drink. Since he was done his homework, he decided to go and get a drink from the kitchen. Just as he was about to go down to the kitchen, he heard something coming down from the basement. Honestly, curious had brought him down there, so he ended up going down to the basement. When he got there, he ended up flipping on the light and turned to see that there was some sort of disheveled man. He appeared to be in his 40s and he looked very dangerous. Ivan went back upstairs and shut the basement door and locked it while he phoned the police about the situation. Of course, his parents were phoned about it too, which the police arrived within a few minutes. But when the police arrived, he was nowhere to be found, and of course, they weren't sure as to who this man was. It could have been maybe just some homeless guy in the area, which of course it had been known for a homeless guy to be homeless people around town, but it really boggles Ivan's mind as to who this man was. Ivan didn't even know if how this man got in, and it turns out the police had said that he must have somehow got in with the key. Ivan had stayed at that house for a good few years, but moved out of that house back in 2019 as his parents couldn't constantly stand the paranoia of someone being in the basement. I don't know what would have happened to Ivan if he didn't go in the basement, but whatever that man's intentions were mostly not good. As most kids around maybe 14 or 15, one of my classmates, which of course we'll call her Kendra for the sake of this story. Now, to bit of context, Kendra had been living in her house with her parents for at least a few years. But it wasn't until 2015 when unfortunately her parents had gone through a major argument, which of course that led them into separation. Of course, Kendra was with her mom most of the time, but every once in a while she would go and see her dad, like every other weekend. At the time, Kendra was in high school, so she honestly was going through a bit of stress with adjusting to the fact that she'd be living with her parent. One parent, actually. But however, one of the times when she was home alone was honestly shocking. So, to give a bit of context, Kendra was home alone as her mom had worked 2 jobs in order to pay rent. So most of the time Kendra would be by herself. Sure, once in a while her uncle would check on her to make sure that she was okay, but she had been the only child for a while, so she was used to being alone. She didn't mind being home alone. which meant that she got her homework done and other things. However, as she was doing her homework in the living room, she all of a sudden felt that something wasn't quite right. She wasn't so sure as to what it was, so she ended up getting up to look outside. She looked outside the front, but she couldn't see if anyone was around. The area she lived in at the time wasn't really the best. It wasn't terrible or anything, but it definitely was a little bit of crime here and there, so sirens in that area was often heard a few times a week. She ended up looking over to see that there was some sort of woman. This woman appeared to be maybe in her early 20s, and she was honestly looked very distressed. Kendra was going to consider asking if she was okay or if she needed help, but she didn't even know who this woman is. And in fact, she didn't even know as to who this woman was, and she never even met this woman. But this woman was starting to look a little bit weird as she's walking around. Kendra had thoughts on maybe calling the cops, but she decided to text her mom and ask her what she should do. As soon as Kendra texts his dad, she ended up looking up to see the woman was gone. Of course, she talked to her mom and asked to get the police involved, and of course she did, just to be on the safe side. The police arrived and took Kendra's statement, but they never found that woman, and Kendra never saw that woman again. Wasn't so sure as to who this woman was or why she was looking around the house and the front yard, but if this woman had bad intentions, then they honestly weren't good. But still to this day, Kendra still lived in that house for at least a few more years, but then she got out of that house as she couldn't stand the constant paranoia that someone was in that house. It really still frightens her knowing that if this woman had some sort of sick plan, then she probably had plans to jump or something. Kendra still lived in that house for at least a year, and before her mom moved to another house, as she couldn't really understand the paranoia, but she couldn't handle it. Kendra never saw that woman again, and she still quite frankly doesn't even know what this woman's intentions were. So this happened to my friend Charlotte, and this was around sometime in 2018. She was alone as her brother was out doing errands while her parents were both at work. Charlotte was at home alone that night, and she was pretty much just watching TV. As she was on her laptop talking with her friends, she ended up hearing what seemed to be like tapping noises. At first she thought that maybe it could have been maybe some little critters that might have made their homes in the walls, like one time they found a raccoon there. But she honestly didn't even know what those sounds were or where it came from, so she just ignored it and continued doing her own thing. About 5 minutes go by, she ended up hearing what seemed to be whispering coming from outside the house. She ended up going out just to see if there was someone out there, but she was curious as to how she could hear the whispering. She looked, but they couldn't find anyone out there, and she even called out if anyone was around, but there was no one in sight. Even her neighbors weren't hearing anything, to which it was kind of odd. It wasn't long until Charlotte came to the conclusion that somebody is really messed up. Of course, that was just that, but it just didn't really matter. Now, I know it can seem a little bit odd, but Charlotte thought that maybe it was just her parents, maybe just doing something, maybe just her brothers, but she ended up looking to realize that there was no one there. It really isn't sure, but of course it just really got her on edge. But of course that was just That's one thing they weren't sure as to who it was. But I think Charlotte told her parents about it, and they said that if it isn't someone they know, then it's honestly maybe just some prankster. Now, what Charlotte thinks that she had experienced that day was completely paranormal. For a bit of background information, this happened to one of my friends named Tristan. Now, this happened to Tristan when he was 16 and he was home alone. His sister had gone to college and she was at college at the time while his mom was out doing errands. It was sometime, I think, in the evening, and of course his mom still hadn't returned yet. While the day had gone by, Tristan was pretty much playing video games when all of a sudden he looked over to see that there was someone at the door. Apparently, he heard the knock on the door and he ended up getting up to answer it, thinking that maybe it was his mom or maybe a friend. He ended up opening the door to reveal that there was this weird guy. "Hey, I have a pizza for Tristan," the man said. Of course, this guy looked to be maybe in his early 30s, and at first Tristan thought that maybe he seemed to be a pizza delivery guy, as he had a pizza in his hands. But the one thing that was pretty odd is that there was no pizza delivery truck, and he didn't even order a pizza. He just took the pizza and thanked the guy, but of course he left within a hurry. Now, Tristan wasn't so sure if his mom ordered the pizza for him, so he decided to call his mom and ask him if she ordered the pizza. She said she didn't, and to say if he knew anyone that ordered the pizza. Tristan explained that the guy was not in a pizza delivery van, and of course this is when his mom starts to get a bit suspicious. She tells him not to eat the pizza and to call the police. And that's exactly what Tristan did. The police arrived and ended up talking with Tristan more about it, and of course, with that being said, Tristan's pizza was confiscated. It turns out that there was cyanide inside the pizza, and apparently whoever made that pizza had put cyanide in it just to target someone and try to wish death on them. Tristan wasn't so sure as to who this man was that delivered him the pizza, but apparently it could have been someone from the neighborhood or someone from out of town. He still isn't sure to this day as to who this man is, but whatever this man's intentions were, especially with that pizza, I don't even know what Tristan would have done if he ate that pizza. He probably may have not been alive by now if he ate that pizza, but I am just glad he contacted his mom and asked about it. The police had never caught the man, even though Tristan gave him the best description. It's not clear as to if this man is caught or if he was somehow wandering around trying to poison pizzas for people. He still isn't sure to this day as to what he would have done, but it still hurts him to this day, knowing that someone had tried to hurt him in his own house. It still isn't clear as to who this man was, but I really hope he is rotting in jail.